Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Bend and Snatch with me, your host, Pennie Varvarides. Now, at the end of last year, I signed up to do a weightlifting competition with some folks from my club. At the time, my weightlifting was going great, and I was training weightlifting probably 5 times a week, up quite dramatically from my usual one or two Ollie sessions a week. The competition is at the end of April, which at the time of recording this episode is 10 days away. Since signing up, my training has slowly decreased, with an almost complete lack of weightlifting at all over March for various reasons. One being it was my birthday, but two being that my brain decided it just didn't like weightlifting anymore. This is obviously absurd because Olympic weightlifting is one of my favourite things. I've been coaching it now for maybe 2 years, training it consistently for the last 3. That's the most consistent I've been with weightlifting the whole time I've been doing it. But it turns out that my flavour of ADHD is signing up for a competition that I'm absolutely not good enough to do remotely well in has meant that my brain completely tapped out. And I've barely been managing 2 Ollie sessions a week. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I'm still training the same frequency as before. I'm just not weightlifting that much. I've actually, believe it or not, been doing more bodybuilding and cardio sessions instead, which is hilarious because anybody who knows me knows that I am not a cardio bunny. And the fact that I've been choosing cardio over weightlifting so consistently makes absolutely zero sense, apart from the part where it makes perfect sense because ADHD controls my every move, obviously. So I was looking into it, and there's something called demand avoidance. Researchers found about 70% of people with ADHD had markers of demand avoidance. 70% is loads, but there are only 132 people in the study, so it's not really enough to say that it's definitely a thing for everyone. But I just thought it was interesting. Now, overlapping this demand avoidance issue is an avoidance cycle that ADHDers can sometimes fall into. According to this website, healthline.com, this cycle typically goes triggering situation, so maybe that's me missing a few too many lifts, an initially negative emotional response, so me getting annoyed that I suck at weightlifting and what's even the point of trying anyway if I'm just going to lose. So, whatever. And then an excessively optimistic thought that provides short-term relief. Now, I don't actually have an example of that bit in this scenario. I guess maybe having a good day and then getting a good week out of training. Then 4, avoidance behaviours that prevent healthy strategies to manage the situation. Now, in my case, the avoidance behaviour is me not training weightlifting. Very annoying, highly predictable. What I didn't predict, though, was that in avoiding weightlifting, the thing that I need to be practicing ahead of this weightlifting competition that I've signed up to do and paid real monies to participate in, I'm doing extra bodybuilding sessions and cardio. And I've been more consistent with my mace swinging and my splits work than I've been in ages. So I guess if you have a thing that you need to do more of than you can't convince yourself to do, just sign up to do something else and watch yourself do the first thing to avoid doing the other thing. So how's that for an ADHD life hack, I guess? So look, I'm joking, sort of. I've accepted that I'm not going to do well at this Ollie comp this month. It's fine. I think I decided that right from the beginning. And that decision is probably the reason that I'm not trying very hard, and that it's all led to me absolutely lifting less on the platform in a couple of weeks than I would have done had I just done the competition in December when I decided to do it. That's fine, whatever. But another part of the problem is that to do well in a competition, that thing has to be your sole focus. And I'm just not that interested in focusing on one solitary thing. I guess that's the ADHD too. When I was training weightlifting 5 times a week, I wasn't training my splits consistently. I wasn't doing much cardio. And actually, I ended up popping a hamstring in a front split session in December. And I've never popped a hamstring before. Thinking about it, maybe I wouldn't have hurt myself if my training was the usual mix of all the things. And popping my hamstring meant that I haven't done any front splits work or heavy deadlifts or RDLs for a while now. And that's removing my favourite things from the rotation. Like, I love front splits, I love RDLs. And with them goes a lot of dopamine. And what am I running low on as a person with ADHD? Dopamine. Yeah, that was right. Hopefully you said it with me. So while this isn't very helpful advice for ADHDers trying to not avoid things, I hope you can get something out of this little story, because I think I learned something about myself. I learned that I am not motivated by competitions that I know I can't win, and that I'm not willing to give up all the other stuff that I love doing to be better at one thing in particular. And that means that I will never be particularly good at any of the things, honestly. This isn't a way to really master anything. And if you're someone who really does want to be good at something, you probably need to give it your full attention, not this bitty thing that I like to do. But that's not what I need. I'm not an athlete. I'm just someone who wants to do a lot of cool things. And I just want to have fun. And people with ADHD can get trapped in avoidance cycles when there are too many rules, or any rules. It might depend. This is probably actually a big part of why I used to struggle so much with binge eating. I would try desperately to diet, cutting out various things, trying to stick to rules, doing whatever I could to control my intake. And then I would get so overwhelmed that it would all backfire and I'd eat everything in sight until I was in physical pain. And then I would just keep going a little while longer, often throwing up in response. It's why disordered eating is so common in women and AFAB people with ADHD. And generally, the solution to this problem is having fewer rules. Now, for me specifically, the solution to the binge eating and disordered food behaviours issue was starting my ADHD medication. That actually made a really big difference on a lot of things. But I guess the medication isn't enough to make me want to be a competitive weightlifter. And maybe that's just because it's not something I actually want. And that's fine. And figuring out what you want and honouring yourself is a big part of living a happy life. You just have to know what it is that you want in the first place. So this is me, less than 2 weeks before my first and probably last weightlifting competition, letting everybody know that I couldn't work out how to convince myself to try harder. So, never mind. And it's also me letting you know that I'm not that bothered about it. Practicing non-judgment is another one of the things that ADHDers are meant to do to help themselves break free of avoidance cycles. And I think this is probably something that the medication has really helped with, because it helps a lot with the anxiety. And I think that's a big part of why I'm not that bothered about any of it. And actually, maybe if I had a bit more of the anxiety, I would have trained harder. But I guess I'd rather be a mediocre weightlifter with less anxiety, I think. I'd love to hear from you, dear listener, if you have any thoughts and or opinions on ADHD and avoidance cycles. What do you do to manage it? Let me know. Last year, I wanted to start running regularly. Every spring, I have the same thought, actually. I decide to start running and build back up. And for the few years leading up to last year, I'd start running and then forget all about it within a few weeks. So then 2 years ago, I told myself that if I managed to go for a run for 5 weeks in a row, I would buy myself a pair of brand new shoes. The day I made that declaration was actually the last run that I did that year. I did not make it to 5. But last year, after a few runs, I made the same declaration. And then actually, somehow, it worked. After 5 weeks of Monday runs, I treated myself to a new pair of Nike Pegasus trail shoes. And they are by far the best trail running shoes of my life. Immediate improvement in the quality of my runs and in my feet. And the ones I got are waterproof, so my feet weren't wet. Excellent. I kept running almost every week until the end of summer. Now, on Friday this year, I did my first run of the year, and it was the best first run of the year I think I have ever had. Sometimes promising yourself a reward for doing a thing is a solid strategy. And maybe actually I should have done that with the weightlifting. Honestly, it didn't even occur to me. I didn't think I needed to bribe myself to do a thing that I actually loved, but now I know better. I've learned something. But obviously the downside to this system is that I have spent more money than is acceptable on treats and also on kit for new sports and hobbies that I have absolutely not seen through. So maybe just make sure that you're really in it before you buy stuff, rather than spending money too soon and then not really doing it. And maybe that should be the takeaway from this episode. Treat yourself, but be sensible about it. And if you have any opinions on ADHD and training for things, I would love to hear them. Leave a comment wherever you're getting your podcast and let's chat.